It all started the morning I woke up to an empty driveway. My motorcycle, my pride, my escape, my only real possession was gone. At first, I thought it was just me being forgetful. Maybe I'd parked it by the mailbox last night, maybe behind the house. But after checking every inch of my property, my stomach turned cold. It was gone, vanished. I stood there staring at the bare concrete, the faint oil stain where my bike usually sat. My hands were shaking. That bike wasn't just a machine to me, it was my late father's last gift before he passed away. And in that moment, I knew I had to find it. I called the police. They came, took notes, nodded politely, then told me the same thing they tell everyone: we'll file a report. But as the officer walked away, I noticed something strange. Across the street behind the perfectly trimmed hedge stood Mr. Peterson, our HOA president, watching me. His hands were crossed behind his back, his expression unreadable. He gave me a small smile and said, "Tough morning, huh?" Something in the way he said it made my skin crawl. I'd lived in this neighborhood for 3 years. Peterson ran it like a private kingdom. He had rules about lawn length, driveway stains, even the color of your mailbox. Everyone feared crossing him because somehow when you did, things started to go wrong. Late fees, petty fines, anonymous complaints. And now my bike was gone. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. Around 2 a.m. I thought I heard an engine, faint, low, familiar. I looked out the window but saw nothing, just the streetlights glowing over perfect lawns. The next morning, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I printed a few missing motorcycle posters and walked around the neighborhood tapping them to poles. But as I was hanging one near the community board, I froze. Someone had taken down all the posters I'd put up earlier that morning. And in their place, there was a new notice. Unauthorized postings are prohibited. Violators will be fined $200. HOA management. I clenched my fists. I knew who had done it. Peterson. I walked straight to his house. It was the largest one in the cul-de-sac, beige walls, stone pathway, garden trimmed like a military parade. I rang the bell. He opened the door with that same artificial smile. "Morning, Ethan," he said. "How can I help you?" "My bike's missing," I said flatly, "and someone's removing my posters." He sighed, tilting his head like a disappointed teacher. "I took them down. You can't post things without HOA approval. It's in the guidelines." "My bike was stolen, Peterson," I snapped. "I don't care about your damn guidelines." His smile didn't move. "Watch your tone, son. We have rules here for a reason. Maybe if you followed them, this community wouldn't have so many problems." I wanted to punch him right there, but instead I turned and walked away, feeling his eyes burn into the back of my neck. That night I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, staring at his house. I noticed the garage light was on. He was inside moving something. I could see shadows shifting behind the frosted glass windows. Something big. My heart started racing. I grabbed my phone, turned on video recording, and walked slowly across the street. The closer I got, the clearer I could hear it, the metallic clang of tools, then a faint rev, a low, muffled engine sound. No, it couldn't be. I crouched near his hedge, holding my breath. The sound came again, a short, sharp roar, then silence. That was my bike. I knew that sound anywhere. I wanted to barge in right then, but I knew I needed proof. I backed away quietly, went home, and planned what I'd do next. The next day, I went to work as usual, but my mind wasn't there. I kept thinking about that sound, about Peterson's smug face. When I came home that evening, I noticed something taped to my door, a notice. HOA violation, parking oil stains on driveway, fine, $150. I laughed bitterly. He was playing with me now. That weekend, I decided to confront him again, but differently. I'd act calm, casual, maybe even friendly. I waited until I saw him trimming his front hedge and walked over. "Hey, Mr. Peterson," I said, forcing a smile. "Look, sorry about the other day, I was upset." He looked surprised but nodded. "Understandable, losing a vehicle is stressful." "Yeah," I said, "you ever have anything stolen around here?" He chuckled softly. "Not really, we keep a pretty close eye on things, cameras all around the neighborhood, that's why people feel safe here." "Cameras?" I asked, pretending curiosity. Oh yes, we have HOA managed security cameras at every street entrance. If someone took your motorcycle, we'd have caught them. That got my attention. Can I see the footage? He paused for a beat too long. Well, HOA records are private. You'd need to file a request with the board. I thought you were the board, I said. He smiled faintly. Checks and balances, Ethan, even I follow the rules. That was the moment I realized he wasn't going to help. He was hiding something. That night I parked my car down the street and waited. The neighborhood fell silent around midnight. Lights went out one by one except his. He was still awake. Around 1 a.m. his garage door creaked open slightly. A faint light spilled out. I saw movement, a silhouette, then the shape of a motorcycle wheel glinting under the light. My pulse exploded. I raised my phone to record, zooming in. The bike was partially covered with a tarp, but I recognized the outline instantly. The curved handlebar, the custom exhaust pipe, it was mine. Suddenly the garage light flicked off. My screen went dark. I ducked behind a mailbox, heart pounding. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly, slow and deliberate. He stepped out, scanning the street. For a moment I thought he saw me, but then he went back inside and shut the door. I stayed there for another hour before heading home. I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I decided to get legal proof. I called the police again and told them everything. The officer sounded unconvinced. You're saying your HOA president stole your bike and hid it in his garage? Yes, I said, trying not to shout. I saw it with my own eyes. He sighed. Do you have video proof? License plate, serial number visible? I hesitated. No, not yet. Then we can't enter his property without a warrant. If you can get clearer footage, we can proceed. That was it, my only option. I went to the local hardware store and bought a small wireless camera, the kind you can hide inside a mailbox. That night I placed it facing Peterson's garage, angled perfectly toward the door. For 3 nights nothing happened, no movement, no sound. I started to wonder if he'd moved the bike somewhere else. Then on the 4th night the footage came in. At exactly 12:47 a.m. Peterson opened the garage and wheeled out a motorcycle, my motorcycle. He adjusted something, looked around nervously, then rode off down the street. I couldn't believe it. He was using it, my father's bike. I felt something snap inside me, anger, disbelief, grief. I wanted to chase him, scream at him, tear his perfect little life apart, but I forced myself to wait. I needed to do this right. I copied the footage, printed still images, and went straight to the police station the next morning. This time they listened. They promised to investigate. I left the station feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks, but that hope didn't last long. When I got home, my front yard was a mess. My trash cans were overturned, my mailbox smashed, a bright orange notice hung on my door. HOA notice, property maintenance violation, fined $500, possible eviction for noncompliance. He knew, somehow he knew. I ran to his house and pounded on the door. No answer, his car was gone. I shouted his name, cursed him, but only the quiet hum of sprinklers answered back. Hours later, as I sat on my porch, a police cruiser pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, the same ones I'd met earlier. Mr. Collins, one of them said, we followed up on your claim. My heart jumped, and the officer sighed. We spoke with Mr. Peterson. He allowed us to check his garage. No motorcycle was found. What? He said he keeps a collection of old engines. Maybe that's what you saw. I shook my head in disbelief. No, he must have moved it. The officer gave me a pitying look. Without a warrant, we can't go further. I'm sorry. They left and I just stood there feeling hollow. He won again. That night I couldn't think straight. I drove around the neighborhood for hours looking for any sign of my bike. Then, as I turned a corner near the community lake, I spotted something, faint tire marks leading off the road into the trees. I parked, grabbed a flashlight and followed them. The trail led to a small maintenance shed, one the HOA used for gardening equipment. The padlock hung loosely, broken. Inside, under a dusty tarp, was my motorcycle. I dropped to my knees, laughing and crying at the same time. It was scratched, but it was mine. My dad's initials were still etched on the gas tank. I started to wheel it out when I heard footsteps behind me. The flashlight flickered. Beautiful night, isn't it? I froze. It was Peterson's voice. He stepped into the light, wearing his usual calm smile, but his eyes were dark. You really should have followed the rules, Ethan, he said softly. Now you've made this much worse for yourself. My hands tightened on the handlebars. You stole my bike, Peterson. He tilted his head. Borrowed. You left it out. It was violating community aesthetics. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're insane. He took a step closer. I'm the reason this neighborhood stays perfect. You think you can just barge in, break into HOA property, accuse me of theft? He glanced at the bike. You know, I could call the police right now and tell them you're trespassing. For a second I didn't know what to do. My mind raced. Then I said, go ahead, I already showed them the video. That wiped the smile off his face. He stared at me, silent, calculating. Then slowly he smiled again, colder this time. You really think anyone going to believe you now? He reached into his pocket and pulled out something shiny. A small keychain, my keychain, the one that used to hang from my bike key. How I started, but he interrupted. You lost control of this situation a long time ago, Ethan. He tossed the keychain into the dirt and walked away into the dark, his voice echoing softly behind him. You'll regret crossing me. I stood there frozen, the bike beside me, the keychain glinting in the dirt. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. Peterson wasn't just trying to steal my bike, he was trying to destroy me. But I wasn't going to let him. Not anymore. The next morning I woke up to the sound of knocking, hard, fast, aggressive. When I opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood there again. Ethan Collins, one asked. Yes, I said cautiously. You're under investigation for trespassing on HOA property and destruction of community assets. I felt my stomach drop. What? That's insane. He's framing me. Sir, we just need you to come with us for questioning, the officer replied flatly. Peterson had done it. He'd actually filed charges. At the station, I told them everything again about the theft, the shed, the video footage, but this time things felt different. The officer looked tired, uninterested. Mr. Collins, do you have any proof the motorcycle was ever yours? Yes, I said quickly. I have the registration, the photos, even my dad's initials on the tank. They exchanged a glance. And where is the motorcycle now? My heart sank. I left it in the shed. They nodded slowly. That shed was empty when we checked it this morning. My mouth went dry. He moved it again. I left the station furious and broken. Every step I took back home felt heavier than the last, and when I turned the corner into my street, my heart nearly stopped. There were people outside, neighbors, all whispering and pointing at me. Peterson stood at the center of it all, calm and composed, holding a clipboard. Good afternoon, neighbors, he was saying. Unfortunately, Mr. Collins has repeatedly violated HOA property boundaries and vandalized community structures. We'll be holding a vote on his removal from the neighborhood. I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked straight up to him and said, You're lying and you know it. He smiled faintly, lowering his voice. Careful what you say, Ethan. These people trust me. You're just noise. Something in me broke then. I raised my voice. He stole my motorcycle. He's been lying to all of you. The crowd went silent. For a moment I thought they might listen, but then Peterson sighed dramatically. You see what I mean? This obsession has gotten out of hand. We all sympathize, Ethan, but accusing your neighbors without proof isn't healthy. Laughter rippled through the group. Some shook their heads, a few whispered. I felt the heat rising to my face, shame, rage, disbelief. Peterson leaned in close and whispered, You should leave before I make you. I didn't reply. I just turned and walked back home, my vision blurry. Inside, I slammed the door shut and sat in silence for a long time. The walls felt like they were closing in. Everywhere I looked, I saw his smug face, his rules, his perfect little kingdom. That night, I decided to end it. If the police wouldn't help, if the HOA believed him, then I'd expose him myself. I set up 3 hidden cameras around his house, one behind a tree facing his driveway, one near his garage light, and one small one disguised inside a planter. I waited for hours. Nothing. Then around 2:15 a.m. the garage door opened. He came out in a dark jacket pushing my motorcycle, across the street. I almost shouted, but I held my breath. He wheeled it behind the community clubhouse, looked around nervously, then disappeared inside. Got you, I thought. The next morning I downloaded the footage and checked every frame. It was perfect, clear, time-stamped, undeniable. I emailed everything to the police department, but I didn't stop there. I printed the photos, hundreds of them, and slipped them into every neighbor's mailbox before sunrise. By noon, the neighborhood was buzzing. People gathered around the clubhouse, whispering, pointing. Peterson came out, his face pale but composed. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly. "Those are doctored images." But no one was sure anymore. Doubt had crept in. That evening the police arrived again, but this time they didn't come for me. They went straight to Peterson's house. I watched from my window as they spoke with him, then entered his garage. Minutes later, one of the officers shouted something. They pulled out my motorcycle. I felt tears burn my eyes. Finally. But the relief didn't last long. Peterson came out yelling, pointing toward my house, shouting that I'd set him up. His voice cracked with desperation. The calm mask was gone. The officers restrained him, loaded the bike into a tow truck for evidence, and left. Peterson stood there, shaking, red-faced, watching me. He mouthed something I couldn't quite read, maybe a threat, maybe a promise. That night I couldn't sleep again, not from fear this time, but from exhaustion. I finally felt like it was over. But at 3 a.m., I heard something that made my blood freeze. A loud crack, then another. I ran to the window. My garage door was wide open, burning, flames licking up the walls. I rushed outside, grabbed the hose, and started spraying, coughing through the smoke. Neighbors poured out, shouting, calling 911. By the time the fire trucks arrived, half the structure was gone. My tools, my father's old helmet, everything burned. And right there on my lawn lay a note written in perfect handwriting. "You should have listened, P." Peterson was out on bail. The next day, the neighborhood felt different. The air was heavy. No one made eye contact. The police patrolled the street twice, but it didn't help. I felt watched, followed. Every night I checked my locks twice. My cameras caught nothing but shadows. Still, I knew he was there somewhere waiting. A week later, the HOA called for an emergency meeting. I almost didn't go, but something told me I should. When I walked in, everyone went silent. Peterson wasn't there. The vice president of the HOA, a quiet woman named Linda, cleared her throat and said, "We have an announcement. Mr. Peterson has resigned from the HOA effective immediately. He's left the state." The room murmured. Someone asked where he'd gone. Linda hesitated. "We don't know. He disappeared 2 days ago." I didn't know whether to feel relieved or uneasy. After the meeting, I walked home slowly, feeling the night breeze against my face. The street was quiet again, peaceful almost. Until I reached my driveway. A small package sat on my doorstep, no label, no return address. Inside was a single object. My motorcycle key. And attached to it a small folded note. "Enjoy it while you can." My heart sank. I looked around. Every house was dark, no movement, but I felt it, that same cold, watchful presence in the air. He was gone, yes, but not really. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I didn't sleep that night. The key sat on my kitchen table, reflecting the faint glow of the streetlight through the window. I stared at it for hours, my mind running in circles. If Peterson had left the state, how did this key end up here? I checked the footage from all 3 of my security cameras, nothing. No motion alerts, no sound, no face, just silence. I stepped outside. The air was damp, cold, heavy with the smell of ash from my burned garage. The street was empty, but something felt wrong, too still, too quiet. Then I saw it. A red blinking light, faint, almost hidden on the lamppost across the street. I walked closer. It wasn't a regular light. It was a camera, small, black, wired into the pole, HOA property. And it was pointed directly at my house. My chest tightened. I looked around. How many of these had I missed before? One on the corner, another near the mailbox, another by the playground. He was gone, but his eyes were still here. I went back inside and opened my laptop. The HOA's website required a password, but I knew Peterson's old username from the meeting minutes I'd once seen, admin please. I tried combinations for nearly an hour. Then, just before giving up, I typed Peterson 1958. It worked. The dashboard opened, filled with folders, timestamps, and live camera feeds, dozens of them, covering every street, every yard, even parts of people's porches. I scrolled through the list, and that's when I froze. One of the camera feeds was labeled E. Collins' backyard. I clicked it. A live image appeared my own backyard from a high angle. The timestamp read 2:13 a.m. And right there, moving slowly behind my shed, was a shadow. I jumped from the chair, ran to the window, but by the time I got outside, whoever it was had vanished. I turned back toward the house and saw something new. A folded envelope taped to my front door. No name, just the HOA seal. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, not handwritten. Stop digging, or we finish what your father started. My knees nearly gave out. My father. I hadn't told anyone about him, not even the neighbors. He died 5 years ago in a motorcycle accident, but the details, where, how, weren't public. Whoever wrote that knew something they shouldn't. I called the police immediately, but when they arrived, they treated it like a prank. No fingerprints on the envelope, no visible signs of trespass, no usable evidence. They left after 20 minutes, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, I couldn't stay inside. I got into my car and started driving, circling the neighborhood over and over, scanning every street. Around 3 a.m., I noticed a black SUV parked near the HOA clubhouse, no plates, engine off, windows tinted. I slowed down, pretending not to notice, but as soon as I passed, the headlights flicked on. The SUV started moving. It followed me. I turned left, it turned left. I sped up, so did it. My heart pounded. I made a sharp right onto Pine Hollow Drive, then another onto the maintenance road that led behind the lake. The SUV's lights grew closer in the mirror. Suddenly, the headlights vanished. I braked, breathing hard, scanning the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness. Then, from the shadows ahead, the SUV's lights came on again, directly in front of me. I slammed the brakes. The vehicle just sat there, blocking the path. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. Before I could dial, the SUV's driver's side door opened. A man stepped out, tall, wearing a dark hoodie. He didn't move toward me, just stood there watching. Then he lifted his hand and pointed toward the woods. I didn't understand until I saw it. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, was a faint flicker of light. A campfire? No, it was something else. A generator, and beside it, 2 other motorcycles, both stripped down, rusted, repainted. They weren't just stealing mine, they were stealing many. By the time I looked back toward the SUV, it was gone, as if it had dissolved into the night. I got out of the car slowly, walked toward the glow. The air smelled like oil and gasoline. As I got closer, I saw it, rows of parts, engines, frames, all scattered across the ground. It wasn't a junkyard, it was a chop shop. And in the middle of it all, half covered under a tarp, was a box marked with the HOA logo. Inside were dozens of documents, property records, complaint forms, lists of non-compliant residents. Next to every name was a status, removed. I flipped through the papers, my breath catching with every line. James Coleman, non-compliance, eviction enforced. Carla Reeves, multiple violations, property reclaimed. E. Collins, pending action. That's when I heard the snap of a twig behind me. I spun around, flashlight raised, and froze. Linda, the HOA vice president, stood there. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. You shouldn't have come here, Ethan. Linda, what is this? What's going on? She looked at the ground. Peterson didn't work alone. The board knew, we all knew. We thought it was for order, for safety. What does that even mean? I shouted. She stepped closer. You were right about your motorcycle, but it wasn't just theft, it was a test. Peterson said you were disruptive. He wanted to see how far you'd go. Why me? She hesitated. Because of your father. My blood ran cold. What about him? Your father used to live here, Ethan, before you did, years ago, before you were born. He challenged Peterson, filed complaints, tried to expose the HOA for corruption, then he died. I stepped back. No, my father's accident wasn't an accident, she whispered. He found out what Peterson was doing, selling seized vehicles, forging fines, threatening residents. The HOA covered it all up. My world tilted, I couldn't speak. Linda looked terrified now. When Peterson left, he didn't run, he's cleaning up, you're next. A branch cracked deeper in the woods. Linda's eyes widened. Run, she whispered, now. I turned and sprinted toward my car, adrenaline surging through my veins. Behind me, I heard shouting, men's voices, heavy footsteps, the snap of leaves. I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and hit the gas. The tires screeched as I tore through the dirt road, headlights shaking. In the rearview mirror, I saw 3 figures emerge from the trees, one of them tall, wearing a hoodie. Peterson. He hadn't left at all. I didn't stop driving until I hit the main highway. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. I pulled over, heart pounding, and called the police again, this time with everything I knew, the location of the shed, the documents, the threats. They promised to send units. But when they arrived hours later, the site was empty. No generator, no motorcycles, no files, nothing. The only thing they found was my flashlight, cracked, still glowing faintly in the dirt. For the next few days, I stayed in a motel outside town. The neighborhood group chat blew up with rumors: Peterson gone, the HOA's disbanding, Linda moved away overnight. No one knew what was true anymore. Then on the 4th morning, I got an email, no subject line, no sender name. Just a video file. I hesitated before opening it. The screen flickered, a grainy security feed from what looked like my burned garage. Smoke still lingered, and then from the shadows, a figure stepped into frame. Peterson. He looked directly at the camera, smirking. Still looking for order, Ethan, he said softly. You never understood. This neighborhood was never about safety. It was about control, always has been. He leaned closer. Your father tried to stop it. You see where that got him. The video cut to black. I stared at the screen for a long time, my hands cold, my breathing uneven. Then, as I moved the mouse to close the video, I noticed something in the corner of the screen, a timestamp. From that very morning. Meaning he wasn't gone. He was still here. Watching me. And this time I wasn't sure if I'd make it out alive. I couldn't sleep. Every shadow, every flicker of light, every distant car horn felt like a warning. Peterson was still here, watching, waiting, and somehow he knew everything I did, every step, every thought. I checked my hotel room for hidden cameras, microphones, anything. Nothing. My phone, laptop, even the charger, all clean. But the sense of being hunted didn't go away. I felt it in my chest, a tight, cold pressure that refused to release. By afternoon, I knew I couldn't stay put. I had to confront him or find a way to end this before he destroyed more than my property. I returned to my neighborhood under cover of daylight, keeping low, observing. The streets were unnervingly quiet. Houses that had been lively just weeks ago now sat like tombs, their blinds closed, their occupants silent. It was like the entire neighborhood had been drained of life, fear gripping everyone. I parked 2 blocks away and crept toward my house. The shed where I had first found my motorcycle, the same shed that had become the epicenter of Peterson's twisted surveillance, was gone, torn down, the dirt flattened as if no one had ever been there. My motorcycle key sat heavy in my pocket. I had no proof that he had touched it again, but I knew somehow he had. I was about to turn back when I heard the faint hum of a motorcycle engine, low and controlled, circling the cul-de-sac. My blood ran cold, my own bike. Peterson was here. I ducked behind a hedge, heart hammering. He rode slowly, deliberately, as if daring me to step out. The familiar roar of the exhaust filled my ears, a sound I had once loved, now a harbinger of fear. Then he stopped directly in front of my driveway, the engine idled. He looked at me, his eyes sharp, piercing. He didn't speak, just waited like a predator. I knew I had to act fast. I ran to the edge of the street, hands raised. Peterson, this ends now. He laughed softly, a sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Ends? Oh, Ethan, it never ends until I decide it does. I felt rage and terror collide. You've ruined lives, you stole my bike, burned my property, threatened me, you're done. He tilted his head, considering me. Done, I haven't even begun. You think you understand me, you think you know control, but this, all of this, it's bigger than you, your father, or your precious motorcycle. His hand reached under his jacket, my breath caught. I expected a weapon, but instead he pulled out a small remote, a black device with a single red button. You've been careful, watching cameras, tracking movement, but there's one final game, he said, pressing the button. Suddenly, lights flickered across the neighborhood, all houses illuminated. One by one, alarms screamed, security cameras spun on their poles, the sound was deafening, and through it all his motorcycle engine continued to hum, impossibly calm. A deep fear settled over me. He had orchestrated this entire neighborhood, every camera, every sensor, every motion detector, into a trap. You wanted proof, he said, stepping off the bike now, walking toward me, slow and measured. Here it is, everyone is watching, everyone will see if you make the wrong move. ChatGPT said. Peterson had taken control of everything, every camera, every resident, every piece of technology. He could erase anyone, twist reality itself. When he whispered, "They'll only see what I want them to see," I knew I had to run. Linda's last words echoed in my mind, run. I fled into the woods, the roar of my stolen motorcycle chasing me through the dark. Hours later, silence. When I returned home at dawn, an envelope waited, a USB and a note. You survived, but survival isn't victory. P. The drive exposed his crimes, stolen vehicles, surveillance, corruption. I sent everything to the authorities. The FBI came, the system collapsed. Peterson vanished. The neighborhood healed slowly. My motorcycle stood in my driveway again, a symbol of survival. I rode with new purpose, knowing control and fear can return anytime. Because wherever Peterson was, he was still watching.